Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the alleged or so-called report or study that was done into investigating the state of cricket in England. And this report is, unsurprisingly, given how things are these days, unsurprisingly has come back saying that cricket is institutionally racist. It's shot through with white supremacists, Nazi fascists. Hitler was seen actually swinging a bat just a moment ago. So now this is like so many of these things that's amplified by the media. Proof that white supremacists, Nazis are everywhere. It's of course a load of nonsense, but that doesn't stop the media from amplifying it. The cricket authorities are grovelling shamelessly in front of all these lies that they know to be lies. And government operatives and various other flunkies and hangers-on and race hustlers and grifters are of course, all jumping in on the act. So what are the examples of racism that they've got here? Well, there isn't any examples of racism cited. So now you'd expect to say, well, English cricket's racist because Leroy is an excellent cricket player, but he's not allowed to play cricket for the local cricket team or whatever because he's black. Now that would be a case of race. He's a good player of good character and he's not allowed to play just because he's black. I mean, that's racism. Let's just call it what it is. But there's no such examples. In fact, there's not. If I've understood the report correctly, there's not one example of racism in there. They use the old hoary chestnut of saying, well, outcomes are not equal. So because outcomes not exactly equal, it must be because of racism. Therefore, it is racism. So there's that sort of logic, that ideological sort of form of logic they apply, and they're allowed to get away with it. I wouldn't let them get away with it if I was commissioning a report, but clearly the intention of the report was to come out with this racism tag. Every sport or anything that's quintessentially English, anything that at all where white people may be able to gather and find sort of common, any sort of common cause or just to enjoy the sport or come together, anything like that, anything and everything is under attack at the moment. Anything that white people can identify with across the Western world must be subverted and destroyed. It must be. Anything that causes white people to gather together must and will be attacked. And we're seeing it now, whether it be with cricket or anything else. It can be entertainment, it can be anything. Anything and everything is under attack for this reason. White people are not allowed to gather around anything at all. It could be their history, it could be anything, but it'll all come under attack. And cricket's no different. Now, cricket's very popular in places like, the subcontinent, for example, India and Pakistan and so on. Cricket's quite popular there. So the idea that it's some sort of white supremacist thing in England is quite absurd. How many white cricket players are there on the Bangladesh national team? How many white cricket players are there in the Pakistani national team or the Indian national team? I don't think there are any. So why are they allowed to have a completely national team of brown people? But if it happens in England, it's hysterical Nazi, Hitler, racism, fascism, white supremacy. Why is it not brown supremacy if it's in the subcontinent? But it's only in white countries where it's evil. Any other country where they've got brown and black people on the team, West Indies, whatever, no, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if it happens in England, if there's a white English team in England, then it's fucking fascist, fucking Nazis, and you're fucking Hitler. So it's obviously a very narrow-minded and very singular view on things, and should be dismissed on that basis alone. But just having a look, so the decision is made that we're gonna have a commission, a study into investigating possible racism in English cricket. So it's okay, fair enough. Or I don't think something like that's needed. You'd be able to just look at it and say, well, there's hardly any examples of racism. If anything, the racism is against the white people rather than by the white people against the brown or black people. Nonetheless, let's commission a study. So now you'd go and find independent, people who've got, excuse me, some sort of expertise in doing these studies, who'd be very independent. You don't want activists doing it, because you can pretty much predetermine the conclusion if you get activists to do it. So you get independent people, and you want some sort of scholarly standards, academic standards, standards of rigor, and standards of testing. You'd want something that would be really meaningful, that you could act on because it would be accurate. Accuracy, facts. Accuracy and facts, of course, today, fascist Nazi, Hitler would do accuracy and facts. The good people go ideologically and just invent the facts. And they're the good people. They're the virtuous ones. The people that rely on facts and evidence and truth, they're the evil ones. So we're in a bit of an upside down world. But instead of getting independent, impartial people, they did the exact opposite. So what clearly was a stage managed and choreographed piece of propaganda production, they actually hired a bunch of anti-white, anti-male, anti-British activists, and said, go away and do a report on racism. And of course, they come back and say racism is rampant, but they do so without citing any examples. Now, they've got a few things in there with sort of, I'm not sure you'd call them racism, but they're saying that private schools have better cricket facilities than government schools. Okay, I'm sure, all right then. So why is that racism? Because there are more white kids at the private schools, it's therefore racism by extension because of, that's a pretty weak argument, isn't it? So should black kids be exactly equally represented in private schools? Would that then cure the racism? So they're not coming forward with cure. They say white people should be suppressed, and that'll somehow create some sort of artificial equality. They're rather vague on this and very ideological, but again, very absent facts. Now, it's true that rich, wealthy private schools, by the way, that have had endowments of land and property going back hundreds of years, it's not something they were handed out yesterday, have got better maintained cricket pitches, or they've got a dedicated cricket pitch which inner city government schools don't have. And these private or public schools, they call it in, because any member of the public can go there if you can afford it. But these private schools are typically not in the middle of the downtown low rent areas of the city. They're typically in sort of broader estates outside of the downtown area. So they got more land and they do have many of them have dedicated cricket facilities. But how is that racism? I don't see how that's racism. The argument is that it somehow promotes whiteness because more white kids go there or something. Or I'm not really sure. They were rather vague on that point. It was just some ideological flailing where richer white kids have more facilities than poor black kids, maybe. Again, is that a class thing or is that a race thing? What is that? I can't see racism in that, but they obviously can. But they're professional race grifters, the people who did this report. And if you're going to hire a bunch of professional race grifters and race hustlers, then this is the sort of outcome you're going to get. But the cricket board would have known that when they put it together. So again, this is a stage-managed, choreographed bit of anti-white, anti-male propaganda. That's all it is. They've dressed it up as being fighting racism. That's bullshit. It is just a piece of anti-white, anti-male propaganda. So they go on to then say that women's cricket isn't on equal footing with men's cricket. Now, okay, well, fewer people follow women's cricket, and when women can produce a game that's the same standard as men's cricket, then I assume more people will go and watch it. But is that racism? I don't know that it is. I mean, there's an awful lot of lesbians on the women's cricket team, but that doesn't seem to count because not enough of the lesbians are black. Is that the racism they're talking about? And why should it be that the argument they seem to be putting forward is that the reason more people watch men's cricket than women's cricket is because the people who watch men's cricket are all fascist fucking Nazis. They're fucking Hitler. And if we can just crush the Hitler side of things, then they'll all flock to watching lesbians play cricket. I don't know. I don't think that would happen. I think people will go to where the game's the most exciting, where the bowlers are bowling balls at 1,000,000 miles an hour or hitting batting the ball out of the pitch. So, that they'll go and watch a game that they see as the most exciting and the most credible in terms of entertainment. And that's the people's choice. But the study seems to say, well, if we allow people to have choice, then they'll choose to be fucking Nazis. So we have to, by denying them choice, then we stop them from being Nazis. So we're doing a good thing. So take the choice away, and then we stop the Nazis, which is similar to the the Jewish view of, well, if the Germans didn't have the vote in 1930s Germany, they couldn't have voted for Hitler. So the solution to stopping any sort of Hitler character in the future is to take away the vote. Problem solved. Look, democracy is only allowable if it's in the right hand. If you leave it in the hands of the people, they might vote for Hitler. So we have to stop voting, which in turn will stop Hitler. So it's that same sort of Jewish logic that they apply to to a number of things, voting included. And you see the talk about Trump when Trump won the 2016 election. If only those plebeians weren't allowed to vote, then Trump wouldn't have got in. If only the right-minded people were allowed to vote, then they would have voted for Hillary and so on. So they had a go at the women's cricket, again, on a basis of equal outcomes. The outcomes are not equal. It therefore must be evil, fascist, Nazi Hitler at work. It must be. What else could it be? I mean, could it be the people's choice? Well, if it is the people's choice, it means they're all Hitler as well. We have to stop them. So I went through this study and I couldn't find any examples of racing. Like there's a guy who's in first grade, a brown guy who's in first grade cricket. Now, if it was that the cricket was racist, as they're claiming or asserting, then how did the brown guy get to be such a well-known and prominent player in the cricket scene if there was this race? He couldn't have got there. So they're saying he's been elevated to the upper levels of the sport in England, but England's also racist. It doesn't allow brown people to go, and so I don't get the argument there. So really they're just asserting it and using ideological anecdotes to support it, but they don't have any examples or any sort of rigor at all. And you've got a bunch of screaming activists who've been hired because they're activists, and one of them has a long history of activism, gender and race activism, for going back many years. And if you look at some of her previous efforts at doing studies and reports, they're fanatical activism. There's not a grain of truth in anything. You wouldn't piss on them. They're so useless, those reports. So they've hired her knowing that this is her credentials. So again, the very intention of commissioning this report was to produce anti-white, anti-male propaganda. There was no other purpose to it. The media, of course, The Guardian, the BBC and so on, have amplified the crap out of it. We have proof that Nazis are everywhere. See, independent study. There was nothing independent about it at all. Independent study says Hitler is everywhere. Yeah! We have to do, government must clamp down, intervention required. And some of the remedies are pure sort of Marxist in the sense of, well, in order to correct all these terrible Nazi goings on, we just have to throw money, and lots of it in all directions, except towards straight white men, in order to redress the imbalance. What is this imbalance? Well, the imbalance isn't, the outcome's not exactly equal, which in Marxist ideology is proof in itself of evil, wickedness, and Nazis and Hitler and so on and so forth. So we can just reject that cricket report out of hand. But but given that the cricket authorities went down like a sack of shit as soon as before the ink was even dry on this fucking report. Now, if that had come in sort of, if they'd sort of come to someone like me, I'd have wanted independent people to do the report. I'd have wanted, okay, well, you say racism, show me the evidence. Where is this racism? I want it documented. I want it minuted. I want it footnoted. I want rigor. I want this looked at by another academic who can peer review it, and so I'd want to go through that process so that when it came out the other end, it was a document of the highest integrity. But instead, they went the opposite way. This is a document, in my view, at least, of the lowest integrity possible. You've been a Tacitus today. You're a pushback channel. Thank you for listening.